Hey, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on when you're watching this week's edition of Hypnosis Week Live. Yes, it's me again, Alex Williams-Smith, better known to many of you as Jonathan Royal, the British bad boy of hypnosis, of magicalguru.com. That's enough about me. This week, I'm joined by another wonderful guest, a gentleman I've known now for well over a decade. We've become great friends. We've also run business projects together in the past. I've seen him grow from working as a stage hypnotist in holiday resorts abroad to now this year, 2020. And this has been recorded in January 2020, but to put time perspective on it, if you're watching it in years to come, into doing this year his biggest UK national theatre tour to date, and that is as a stage hypnotist, but he does have involvement in the personal development arena as well, internet marketing, a whole bunch of other things as well. So please welcome the man himself to the show, Mr. Robert Temple.
Hello, hello.
You all right, dude?
Very well, thank you for having me.
I forgot to mention, you've also got a background in magic. Surprisingly, one or two hypnotherapists I've spoken to, it's turned out they've got a background in magic that I didn't know about. Yeah, obviously you are a stage hypnotist. You also over here have internet marketing interest to help people build their businesses and stuff. You've still got an interest in magic. It's just that you don't necessarily perform it in the way you once did. And I know that you do the odd bit of therapy. How did you get to where you are now? Because at one point, I ask everyone this at the beginning, because at some point you didn't do all that.
No. So when I was a kid, I was a really shy, quiet, terrified, nervous kid, terrified of everything. Didn't really fit in very well. I would never say I was bullied or picked on particularly, but I had some friends, but I certainly didn't fit in very well. I was crap at sports. Didn't like the things that most people would like. And when I was about 4, I lived in London at the time, northwest London, and I went to a playgroup party, and they had a magician on. It was either a magician or a clown, I can't remember. And I was obsessed with this magic show, and apparently wouldn't stop talking about it. And then a little bit later, I went to a children's birthday party for another kid at school, and they had a magician as well. And it was a magician called, one of the two, I can't remember which one, but one of the two was a magician called Smarty Artie, I believe, and it was a chain of kids entertainers who all worked under the brand Smarty Artie, I think just around the London area, and again was obsessed with magic and just wanted to do it. So after lots of badgering and pestering, my parents bought me a magic set, Paul Daniels magic set. And whereas most kids would play with it, they'd have fun with it, they'd show people some tricks, they'd lose half the bits, and then it would get put in a charity shop or thrown away at some point, and they'd move on to something else. I just never did. So growing up, took it very seriously, wanted to be a magician, joined the Northern Magic Circle junior section when I was 11, joined the Magic Circle Young Magicians Club when I was 13 or 12. Whatever their age limit is, and started going to meetings. So we used to go to London pretty much every month for the Magic Circle Young Magicians Club meetings. Took it very seriously. That was all I was ever going to do. Obviously, I was going to school at the same time. And I did when I was about 14, I saw a hypnotist, and I thought that would be cool. And lots of magicians, as you know, all too well, kind of find additional strings to their bow, things they want to do, whether that be juggling or ventriloquism or whatever. And for me, I was interested in 3 things: hypnosis, pickpocketing, and escapology. And I think the reason those 3 things grabbed my attention is that I, as a magician who did tricks, had no idea whether they were real or not. I didn't know whether escapology was just having a secret key hidden somewhere, or whether there was really something more to it. I didn't know whether pickpocketing was real. I didn't know whether hypnosis was real. But the one that grabbed my attention more than any of them was hypnosis. So I started trying to find books and things on it. Eventually stumbled across all of your stuff, DVDs and courses and stuff. I bought them online on eBay, I think, had them sent to the house, and studied them over a period of a couple of years. And eventually, when I was about 16 and a half, I did my GCSEs, so I was nearly 17, and I decided to go out and just give it a go. So
I've got to bump in there, because I know you've left a little bit of the story out there.
Which bit's that?
The bit that you may have ordered certain things using your dad's credit card without telling him.
Ah, yes, I did. I did order them with my dad's credit card without telling him, which did get me in trouble at the time. And I think he would have been okay with it had I got my GCSEs out of the way and then said,
Yeah.
"Can I have the money to buy this stuff?" But yeah, it was the fact that I did it whilst he was like, "Well, just get your GCSEs done first." Anyway, so I was studying for my GCSEs, obviously, at the time. And then when I finished them, I decided, right, I've studied this now for a couple of years, time to go out and start doing a show. So I sent out a bunch of letters to some pubs and decided to do some free shows in the Northeast just to get some, because I'd moved up to Sunderland when I was a kid.
To clarify for viewers, how old are you at this point? You've just
Now.
left, so you're 16?
Yeah, I might have just turned 17. But 16, 17. 16, I believe.
Very, very young.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, so I decided to give it a go. So I wrote up, I bought a course from an American magician called Dave D, who teaches sort of marketing for magicians, or did at the time. And it taught how to create sales letters and stuff that you could send out to venues as an entertainer to get booked. So I knocked one together, and it was based on his template, and it basically explained why I was doing the show for free. And it had some bullshit reason why it was free. And sent it off. And I think I sent out 20 letters. I got about 4 replies. Everyone else must have thought it was a scam. And of those, 2 of the pubs booked me to go and do a show for free. And then I got offered a third one from somebody who basically, a hypnotist I'd met, had been offered a gig, but the budget was only 200 quid and it was in London. And he said, well, if you want to do some shows for free, that'll cover your cost to get to London and back. But he said, I can't do it for that. So if you want it, you can have it. So I did two shows for free, and one where they were paying 200 quid just to cover my expenses down to London and back. And the shows, and I thought if I do them for free, then it doesn't really matter if it doesn't work. I didn't know quite then what I know now. I probably would have taken a different approach to it now. But I went down, did the shows. They all went well. A couple of the pubs booked me back as a paid gig later, and I did one of them a few times. And it was a good experience. That got me started. Eventually that led to a mutual friend of ours, Adam Knight, here in the Northeast, got offered a summer season abroad, and obviously it wasn't in a position in his life where that was something he could consider, but offered it to me. Went across and did that. That led to 4 summer seasons abroad, and then came back home at the end of the 4th one, decided to start things up here. Worked as a sort of normal hypnotist, if you like, doing pubs and clubs and venues and the odd corporate event, weddings I used to love doing. And then it was only about 3 years ago from this point, I decided that I wanted to do a theatre show. And rather than wait for a producer or somebody to spot me and put the show out, I decided to just screw it and do it myself. And that began the project that we're now 3 years into, and having lots of fun, making lots of mistakes, learning lots of lessons. And that's growing steadily. And then in the meantime, when I'm not on tour, I am obviously performing at other events and venues and things. And then I am also building other businesses too.
Cool. Now that gives people a kind of a background. I'm going to pick into certain areas a bit more as we go along. So you use it. Hypnosis largely, you've got to get people in through the door, obviously. So there's advertising goes in. So we know that a lot of people in show business will use publicity ploys. Now, I know the truth behind certain things, so that's why I'm purposely throwing it out for people watching. One of the things that keeps bobbing up when come and see the show that, they tried to ban. Now, I know there's truth behind that. There's people use that as trying to sensationalize things, but I know there's truth behind that. So would you explain to people the truth behind that? Because it is genuinely true. It's not just some showbiz hype thing. Yeah,
so back in 2009, I decided to do a show, and I wanted to sell. It was the first time I'd ever hired a venue to sell tickets, and we were going to film it as well. So I was looking around. I looked at theatres and I looked at a few other things, and eventually settled on the Birdcage Cabaret venue in Manchester, which is a sort of drag cabaret comedy venue. And so you and I actually worked together on that project. I hired the venue. I hired a film crew from Edinburgh, and it cost thousands and thousands and thousands of pounds to put it on. We put the tickets on sale. I'd never done that before, so that was a learning curve. I used to think you just put a poster in the window and people would come and buy tickets. So that we worked really, really hard for months and months and months. It sold super well. And about a week before the show happened, I'd obviously had the license through from the local council. For anyone in the UK, you'll know that as the 1952 Stage Hypnotism Act. Anyone outside of the UK, you've probably heard of it if you've done any digging into hypnosis at all. It's just this antiquated law that we have to abide by in the UK. So I applied for the license with Manchester City Council, got the license granted. It was a woman called Jeanette who granted the license. She was head of licensing for the council. Had no problems at all, actually. I had 2 insurance policies just to make sure. I got 2 separate insurance policies, so I was doubly insured, if that's a thing, unless they cancel each other out. I don't know. And then the license was granted. But a week before the show, I had a voicemail from this Jeanette woman asking me to call her urgently, so I did. And she basically said, "I'm really sorry to let you know we're going to have to revoke the license for the show." So of course I was horrified. I said, because when you book a venue and hire a film crew and you've sold tickets and all that, if you had to cancel the show for any reason and refund everybody, the costs of pretty much everything are still paid for, and obviously we'd still paid for all the advertising and all that. So I said, and I think I was actually down there for about a week staying at yours before the show. So I was there anyway. I was going to be there anyway. So she said, we're going to have to cancel the license because one of our licensing officers been past the venue and we had enormous posters in the window. They must have been about 5 foot tall posters that said, triple X rated hypnosis show and all of that. And she said, "You didn't tell us it was going to be an X-rated hypnosis show or even a rude hypnosis show." And I said, "Well, you never asked." And she said, "Well, we did. I've got the form here. And one of the questions is, please describe the nature of the hypnotism." So I did. I described the nature of the hypnotism. I said, "Volunteers in the audience will be safely and gently relaxed into a hypnotic," because it's copy and paste in my head. It's the same words I use all the time. So anyway, she said, "Well, that wasn't what we meant." And I said, "Well, you didn't ask me to describe. There's no question in that particular form that asked me to describe what was going to happen under hypnosis." So she said, "This is what we're going to do." So I called. So I said, she said, "Our lawyers are going to see what they can do, but we're going to revoke the license." So I called you. And I said, "What do we do?" And he said, "Well, you've got equity membership, call equity." So I said, "Okay." So I called equity and spoke to their legal department, and they said, "Okay, great, we'll see what we can do." Now, it's a bit of a blur what happened from that point. I believe it was a couple of days of sort of panic, wondering what the hell was going to happen. And basically, equity came back to me in the end and said, "Right, we've spoken to Manchester City Council. They haven't got a leg to stand on, and we think they know that." So that's that. You can call Jeanette back and everything's fine. So I called her back and she said she never said that she was in the wrong ever. She did just say, "Well, it looks like we're not going to revoke the license, but we are going to send some licensing officers along to monitor it. And basically, if we think you've broken the law in any sense, in other words, if we think you've broken the terms under which the license was granted, then we'll be able to prosecute, whatever that looks like." So 2 blokes came along in high-vis jackets and sat at the back. Actually, lovely guys, really lovely guys.
They were
really nice guys. They came into the dressing room before the show and they said, "Right, this is Jeanette's asked us to bring this," and they had a piece of paper and it had all of the terms of the license on it, and they should highlighted the ones that were particularly relevant. And one of them is the term that says the show must be conducted in such a manner so as not to cause offence to any member of the audience or any participant on stage. You can tell we read this shit a lot, can't you? And so that was the thing, and said, so as long as nobody in the audience can ever claim they're offended, then that's okay. And they said, well, I suppose so. So the guys went and stood at the back. Now, you were my warm-up act that night, and you went out to G up the crowd and did some magic and mind reading and just generally got them all to agree with the fact that they were okay with us saying terrible words.
Yeah, I said basically every swear word you could think of and said, if you're offended,
leave.
F off at the venue.
Before the hypnosis show begins. So
therefore, it had nothing to do with the licence, and therefore it was established at the end of it that before we bring Robert Temple on stage, is it safe to say that all words and language used so far, anyone remaining here is prepared to say they're not offended by it? The whole audience stuck their hands up, and I turned to the licensing people and said, feel free to stay for the show, but there's your proof nobody can be offended tonight. And it went on to be an amazing show, and there was diddly squat that Jeanette could do.
And I believe that Jeanette doesn't work for Manchester City Council anymore. So the last time I was in Manchester was on tour in 2018, and I applied for the license, and it was dealt with by somebody else, and it was granted instantly without question. It was easy to get it the second time than it was the first time.
Well, there's probably a note on file. Don't argue with any application from.
Don't argue with this twat. Yeah, so that's all good.
Excellent. Oh, dearie me. So just rewinding ever so slightly before we come more up to date. After you've done the pubs and clubs that you got the first few gigs for free through the process that you mentioned before, you went over then to the holiday resort arena. Can you tell people who are either hypnotherapists and don't know about stage hypnosis, or people who've just got into stage hypnosis and don't know what that entails, what the sunny resort kind of entertainment arena job is like?
Yeah, it's interesting. The first year I did, I went to Kavos, which is in Corfu, the Greek island, and then the rest of them were in Kos, a resort called Kardamina in Kos. It's an interesting experience, and when I went out there for the first 2 years, I definitely wasn't the person I am today. Like, I was still very shy, very nervous, not very good at making friends, found that all quite difficult. And so I sort of wrapped myself in a safety blanket. I went out with my mate Gary, who was running the tech for my show. He'd just left one job and was waiting to start a new job, so I had a few months off. And so he came out and teched the show for me, and that was a bit of a safety blanket because I'd known him for a long time. And he's a few years, like 4 years older than me. So we went out and did that and had a blast, but I didn't drink very much, like just had a very sort of subdued time for the first couple of years. And when you get out there, it's an interesting experience. They're mostly British holidaymakers that I was working for, who are looking for an interesting week away, normally a rowdy 18 to 30 drink-fueled holiday. But then there's always a couple of nights where they have something that's a bit more sort of subdued and go to a cabaret bar of some description. The one that, I mean, the season that is particularly representative of how I ended up was when I moved to Kos. Kavos, I was really finding my feet, and we cancelled quite a lot of shows because I didn't quite know the process of getting people into the bar. Not that that's really my job, it's the bar's job, but they do put a lot of pressure on you as the entertainer to go out and talk to people and stuff. So when I got to Kos, that was really representative. It was a cabaret bar run by a British family who'd moved out there, and they said, we want you to do 2 or 3 nights a week for us in our bar, and then we'll drive you around the island. As long as you don't do any other bars within that specific resort, we'll drive you around the island. I mean, the island's only about 50 minutes big. We'll drive you around the island, and we'll take you to the different resorts and introduce you to the equivalent of us there. And they'll probably give you a night's work as well. And there wasn't much other entertainment there. There was me. There was an Elvis tribute act called William. There was a comedian called Brian, who I never really got on with for any particular reason. Didn't seem to like me very much. There was a Roy Chubby Brown tribute act, who I've since hung out with and is great. And I think that was probably it for the most part. Oh, there was a few singers. So I became quite popular quite quickly just through being different, I think. It's a lesson that I have leveraged or used and leveraged for the rest of my career, really, is the fact that the minute you are a hypnotist, that's different from what most entertainment is. Most people do know roughly what that is, although that's getting more difficult. We now have a generation of people who've never seen a hypnotist before and don't know what it is. Different story for a different time. Or later in this, but so I found that the minute you say there's a hypnotist on, people sort of know what that is, and they know roughly what it entails, and they want to come along. So that was good. And so pretty much every night of the week, sometimes twice a night, I would go out on stage, do a show for about 90 minutes. Most of the time you could just do whatever you wanted, say whatever you wanted. Even if there were families in the bar, those families generally didn't mind you just cracking on, swearing and doing stuff that they probably wouldn't ordinarily let their kids watch, but it was fine. They just didn't care. They're on holiday. Yeah. And you get paid in cash. The money's crap. You just do the show, and I think I got about 250, 300 euros a show. Got paid.
Went out, had less than that now, isn't it?
It's definitely been driven down from that now. Yeah, I know there are some Spanish holiday resorts where people are getting 80 to 100 euros a show. So I was getting 250, maybe I think 200 euros a show was probably the lowest I got when the season was really quiet. Like at the start of the season, because I went out in the end of April, and at the start, because these are not year-round holiday resorts that I was working in, and they were, sometimes I was going out on stage for 12 to 15 people. And then it was down to the bar whether they wanted to just do it anyway and pay me a bit less, like 200 euros, or whether they would say, because obviously nobody's paying to be in the audience, they're just going to try and make their money back from the drinks and food.
Yeah.
And so, some resorts were like, well, we've advertised the show, there's 12 people in, we'd rather you did the show. So I remember nights distinctly. There's a bar called Sydney Bar and Hotel in Kafalos, a lovely place in Kos. And I remember distinctly going out and doing shows where I had 8 people on stage and 4 people left in the audience, and just ploughing through it because I wanted me 200 euros. I mean, it was the best experience. You know, back in the day, people had to do national service and they had to go off to the army and serve their time in the army. I think everyone in this day and age should have to go and spend a season working abroad in Spain or Greece or somewhere, because the way it changes you as a person is just unbelievable. Whether you're a hypnotist or working in a bar, I think everyone should have to go and do a season abroad when you finish school, because it's just a great experience.
Cool. So then you ended up back in England, as you said, and the birdcage occurred. The theatre thing will come to a little bit later on.
Yeah.
And then surprisingly, it took you until last year to do anything at Edinburgh Festival.
Yeah.
Wherever you are in the world, you've probably heard of Edinburgh International Arts Festival. If not, just tap it into Google and YouTube, and you get literally thousands of acts over the course of a month, where there are literally sometimes hundreds of shows going on at exactly the same time in hundreds of established and makeshift venues. It could be like the back room of a bakery shop. And I'm not taking the Michael there. There is literally shops where their back room becomes a small performance art venue during this mad month. And well, can you tell us about your experience there? Because I know you did there's two fringes. There's what they call the paid fringe and the free fringe. Paid fringe, you've got to hire venues, pay for the hire, and you're taking a massive financial risk. Or if you're a famous name, television comedian, you may get put in there and paid a fee by a promoter who takes the risk. But you've really got to be on telly a lot for that, haven't you?
Yep.
Or there's the free fringe, which is what you did last year. Do you want to explain how it kind of works? Because
so it's really
took you so long to do it.
Yeah, I mean, I've been to the Fringe for a load. So my dad used to work for a bank in Scotland, and he was in Scotland from Monday to Friday every week for years and years. And my stepmom was a teacher, so she had the whole of August off. So we used to go up to the Fringe for the whole of August and just go and watch everything I could while my dad was at work. So mostly magic shows and stuff. And so I've always wanted to do it, really, since I was about 12. And yeah, you're right. It has taken me to being 32 to actually do it, and mostly just through fear of not knowing what I didn't know. Really, that was the primary reason. There's nothing else would have stopped me from doing it. I didn't know. I thought there must be things I don't know that make this more difficult than it looks. And you hear of lots of people losing money. Like the vast majority of people who do the Fringe lose money. Even some famous people will lose money, or people who've had a decent enough career. So I was conscious of that. So a long time went by, and eventually I thought, you know what, I'm doing the theatre tour now. I've done one tour. I've got another one coming up, and then obviously this is the third one this year. So I thought, let's do the Fringe because it might be good exposure. It's good rehearsal for the show actually, and also it may get people from all over the world go there. Certainly from all over the UK. So people may come and see my show in Edinburgh, like it, and then want to go and see the full 2-hour show because you limit to an hour in Edinburgh. People might want to go and see the full 2-hour show on tour and buy tickets, so it could lead to generating ticket sales. So I looked at the two Fringe options, and I spoke to lots of my friends who've done the Fringe either for a long time or who have done it at least a few times. And the general consensus from almost everybody was to do the free Fringe. I remember speaking to, do you know Ian Kendall?
Yeah.
The magician. So I was talking to Ian. He's about 9 foot tall, lovely bloke, known him for a long time, and I met him at the Edinburgh Fringe, and he lives in Edinburgh. And he said, if you want to get reviews and do the Fringe, then do the paid Fringe. If you want to make money and just be seen by lots of people, do the free Fringe. And when the free Fringe started, there were lots of people who had sort of a bit of a negative attitude about it, thinking it was probably sort of cramping the style of the paid Fringe a little bit. So the way it works is basically it's run. So there's a few of them now. The one that I did is the original. It's the PBH Free Fringe, run by a great guy called Peter Buckley-Hill, a comedian, and he basically started it as a sort of anarchistic movement against the Fringe, the corporate body that is the Fringe back in the day, where he just got a room. He went to the Fringe, he got a room, and he said to people, he put posters up and he said, if you want to come to this show, it's free. Just pay whatever you think it's worth on the way out, if you want to. And if you don't, just leave and enjoy the show for free. And that was that. And so eventually, years and years later, I think I might be talking out my backside here. I think it's like 18 years old now. It's going on a long time anyway. Moving down the line, it's now this enormous thing which has hundreds of its own shows happening. It's a huge organization that's entirely voluntarily run. It doesn't make a profit. All it tries to do is not lose money. It just tries to break even. And so basically the way it works is, as an entertainer, you can apply to be in the free Fringe. You just have to fill in a form that suggests that you will comply with their sort of ethos and their cooperative way of working. Okay. You will tell them roughly what you want in terms of a venue and stuff, and tell them why. I think one of the questions is, how do we know the show is going to be any good if we've never seen you before? So you just have to sort of say, this is what I've done. This is my sort of this is my credibility. And so I filled in the form, sent it off. They came back and said, the only slot we can give you is at 2:30 on an afternoon in the venue size that you're looking for, which is 250, or we can give you a smaller venue which only holds 60 or 70 people at about 9 o'clock at night. So I was a bit torn really, because I wanted the 9 o'clock time slot, but I wanted a bigger audience as well. So again, I went back to a bunch of my friends and said, what would you do? Got slightly mixed responses. About 80% of them said that'll be fine. There's people looking for adult shows at all times of day. Yeah. And a couple of people said, oh, I'd try and get a later time slot if you can. So I thought, sod it, something's better than nothing. So I took it. So the way it works is that the venue is free. Being in the PBH brochure, which is called the Wee Blue Book, that's free. Participating in the whole thing is free. So the only expenses are my accommodation, flyers and posters to put around the city. And if you want to be in the proper, the main Edinburgh Fringe brochure, then you can pay to be in that, which is about 300 quid. So I thought
they'll still let you take out an ad that you've got a show on in there, even if you're not part of their paid.
Yeah, it's fine. Yeah. So I paid the 300 quid to be in there and be on that. And actually, I missed the deadline to be in their brochure, but I did get onto their website, and everybody told me being on the website is the most important thing now, because that gets you onto the iPhone app as well, an Android app. So I went up and did it. I got some last minute accommodation at a sort of grungy student accommodation digs, which is where lots of people stay when they do the Edinburgh Fringe. We were staying with some two girls and a guy who were doing a play there, and they just had a spare room that I sublet. And it was a totally new experience. And I remember on day one, the day before the free Fringe, it's literally, because everything's free, the venues are given to you for free. We're lucky that the venue that I'd got is probably one of the nicer ones on the Fringe in terms of what it's got. It's a nightclub live music venue, so it has a stage, it has lights, it has sound, it has everything, and the tech guys are great. So we went down the day before to carry chairs in and set the chairs up. So we put all the chairs out, and the venue I was in has two venues, the one that I was in and a slightly smaller one. And so we set all the chairs out, and it was all good to go. I met the other acts. I knew a couple of them anyway. And then the day of the first day that I had a show, I remember I went down, I was second on. So basically at 1 o'clock, there was a comedian on called Dan Willis, who's actually from Newcastle, but lives in Australia. And he does a show there every year. His show is about a whinging Pom's Guide to Australia. So what it's like being a whinging British person living in Australia. So he was on before me. And then there's a 15-minute turnaround while they get one audience out and you set up and they get the next audience in. You've got 15 minutes. That includes audience out, audience in. So they hold the audience in like a whole...
It's a matter of interest. So they've just been seeing the comedian. Do they all have to physically leave to come back in, or if they've decided they want to see your show, can they stay in the seat?
No, they have to leave and come back in, because otherwise they wouldn't have the chance to walk past his bucket.
Right, okay, because that's what I was thinking, might not. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, cool. They have to leave and come back in. So there's 15 minutes. Everyone gets asked to leave, and you do get lots of people. So Dan was great. Dan would always say, if you're looking for something else to do, there's a great comedy hypnotist on straight after this. So go to the bar, grab yourself another drink, come straight back down when they call for you. And so that was that. So it's a really good atmosphere. Like, we all got on so well and just made some great friends out of it, and it was excellent. And so you've got 15 minutes to get the audience out, and I would stand at the door and hand them a flyer for my show as they're on their way out of that. There's no ego at the Edinburgh Fringe. If you're doing a show, you're standing there somewhere handing out flyers. Like, there's no big I am. There's no point in trying to be a star, especially at the free Fringe. It's you're encouraged not to hire huge teams of flyers, because that's not fair. The idea is they're trying to level the playing field from people who've got an enormous budget and people who haven't. And so I remember on the first day... It's
quite easy to spot there are people who hire teams of people.
Oh, 100%.
I mean, I know I was down there with Simon Warner and Viva Hypnosis, and he hired and paid people to go flyering.
Definitely, yeah. I remember I was chatting before the show, well, the morning of the first show, I went down to, and I thought, if I set my stuff up to one side, when Dan's finished and gets off, I can just lift my stuff on. So I found 10 chairs and put them to one side in the sort of vague wing space of this little stage, and sort of worked out what I was going to do so I could get out and get set up quickly. And so I remember I was talking to Dan before the show, and I was quite nervous because I didn't know if I was going to get an audience or not. I thought, I don't know how I'm going to get an audience, because I'm in the brochure, sure. I'm on the Edinburgh Fringe app and website, sure. But there's 3,000 other shows on this month. A lot of them are on every day. And I'm trying to work out how the hell am I going to get an audience? So I thought, well, I've got my flyers. I better go out flyering. And flyering is not something I'm very good at. I find it hard to flyer people. I don't like doing it. So I thought, well, sod it. So I put my suit on. So I thought, then at least I stand out and they know I'm meant to be there. And I went out into the streets. And Dan had said, don't go flyering, man. You'll be fine. You'll have an audience. Just don't work so hard. Sit down at the back. enjoy my show, and then just get yourself ready for the show. And I said, no, I need to have an audience. Anyway, so I went out flyering. I'm in about 45 minutes, I must have given out a good, I don't know, 6 or 7 flyers. You know, that's the sort of quantity that we're talking about. A good 6 or 7 flyers. And Gary, my tech guy who came to me with the first season in Greece, he was up there as well to help out, and he must have given out another 2 or 3. So, you know, we were really going for it that day. And I went back to the venue, terrified, thinking this is not going to happen. There's going to be nobody here today. So Dan had done his show, and he had a decent enough audience, and he finished, and he went and stood at the back, and they walked past and put money in the bucket, and off they went. And so I quit. So Dan went off to go and enjoy his day, and I set up all my chairs, and I was still sort of nervous, thinking what happens if nobody comes, and that's that. Anyway, our best sort of ballpark guess is about 150 people turned up, and I thought, bloody hell, where have you come from? How's this happened? And I thought, wow, that is just the movement that the Free Fringe has created now, and the Fringe app in its own right. I mean, I did poll towards the second half of the month. I did start polling people in the audience to find out, how did you find out about the show? Was it from the Edinburgh Fringe app? Was it from the Free Fringe brochure? Was it because I handed you a flyer? And I did get better at flyering by the end of the month.
You couldn't get much worse.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think there were 2 days we had to pull the show because there was only about 15 or 20 people in. And they were both midweeks. On the 2 Saturdays I was there, I already had a booking on one of the Saturdays in Bedfordshire, so I had to drive down and do the mental trip down to Bedfordshire to do a show and back. So I missed one day at the Fringe to do that. But I had 2 Saturdays at the Fringe, and we had about 300 people in on both days, which was capacity for that venue. You know, that's standing room only. And every other day, apart from the 2 we pulled, we had between 150 and 200 people in. And so, yeah, it was really, really good. I've applied to go back this year. They haven't started giving out the offers yet, but I've applied to go back with the new show this year, and hopefully that'll get it. And my plan, sort of going forward, is to do the Fringe every year, and then tour in September and October every year, and use the Fringe as I don't want to call them previews because that's not fair, but on the basis that people aren't buying tickets for that, they're just coming along, and if they like it, they pay some money. I feel like that's a really good opportunity for me to go and do 23, 24 shows. It varies slightly each year. Do 23, 24 shows in front of what are effectively paying audiences, but with a little bit less pressure. It's very much a place where you can work in new material and try stuff. And I know that I'm good enough at it that it'll pull off anyway. And then take that show out on tour through September and October.
Did they let you sell anything back of the room? I know you don't have much time, but I mean, if you have somebody there, would you do it?
You can. It just becomes tricky. You've got to be careful not to muddy the waters with who's going to give you some money for nothing and who's going to buy something. Well, not for nothing, but for the show, and who's going to buy something. What a lot of acts do instead is they merge the two. So they say, if you want to tip a £5, that would be great. If you want to tip a £10. So basically, the general pitch is, if you bought a ticket for this show when it's on tour, it's about 20 quid. You've seen a half of the show because this is only an hour. That's a 2-hour show. So I think this is well worth a tenner. But if you've got a tenner, that would be lovely. If not, a £5 would be great. It's very much like watching a busker on the street, the sort of bucket pitch. But what lots of entertainers do say is, and if you do tip 15 quid, you can have a T-shirt, and they've got a T-shirt that's branded up. So it's one of the things I'm going to do for this year, not next year, this year, is to have some. Rather than
put some money in the bucket and buy some as well.
Yeah,
it's been blended together. It's an incentive, like these crowdfunding sites. The more you donate, the more you get, type thing.
Exactly right. Yeah, and it definitely works. You know, and halfway through the season, I realised I was missing a trick. So I didn't have a card reader, so I went out to Ryman's and I bought one of the Sum Up card readers. So because I realised a lot of the other entertainers on the Free Fringe were able to take card payments, and I thought, oh, that's useful. So I went out, and that definitely paid dividends.
And there were people that would actually give you money at the back of the room via card.
Yeah, I mean, to the point that, so at the end of the pitch, I just saying, if you haven't got any cash, don't worry about it. I do take card. And if you really just don't have any money at all, then obviously just shake my hand, say thank you for the show and leave. Very few people do that. Very few people put nothing in. And interestingly, in my venue, because it's 2 floors underground, there's no signal, and they don't have Wi-Fi available at all. And so I said to the other guys, how are you doing card payments? And they said, if you just take them up this, there's a little back exit, and it's got a flight of stairs that takes them to street level. Just say if you've got to pay by card, just wait over here while everyone else is walking past and putting money in, and then you take them. And I used to make a joke about it. I said, "Follow me. It's like the Pied Piper of card payments, and I'll take you up this little flight of stairs." And people would do it. They'd come up with you. You know, a stream of 15 or 20 people at each show would come up the stairs with you, and you just say, "How much would you like to pay?" And they'll say 5 or 10 or 15 or 20 or whatever, and they just pay on card.
So I don't want figures because it was your business, quite frankly, but by the sounds of it, even after travel, accommodation, food, and all the cost of being there, you didn't lose money. You made a profit by the sounds of it.
Made a profit. Did the first Edinburgh Fringe I did, made a profit. Yeah, definitely. I've learned some mistakes. I made some mistakes along the way. I've realised there are definitely some places I could have saved a lot of money and had a more efficient fringe, but that's just learnings for next time, and hopefully the profit will be bigger this year.
Excellent. So you say that's going to be like your tryout, rehearsal, experiment.
It's the first chance to put the material in front of an audience, basically.
Yeah, and then it will go out. You know, later in the year, you come back and you do the tour, the theatres and stuff. How people who don't know show business will probably assume that to hire theatres is monumentally expensive, which generally speaking it is.
Yeah.
People are involved in the industry will also be aware that it's increasingly expensive. So how the bloody hell it takes some balls to get so many venues?
So I did it by accident. I originally wanted to work cruise ships for a bit. And so I knew that in order to get booked by a cruise agent, I would need to, and there's a funny story here. I knew in order to get booked by a cruise agent, I would need to have a video of the show that was in a venue that was of the caliber that could be on a cruise ship. And cruise ships have got the most beautiful theatres in them.
Yeah.
So where I lived at the time, and I now live in Durham, but where I lived at the time in Newcastle, there's a beautiful theatre, you've been there, called the Tyne Theatre and Opera House, 1,100-seater Victorian theatre. And I got in touch with them, and I got in touch with Newcastle City Hall, which is about 100 seats bigger. And I got in touch with the other main theatre in Newcastle, because there's about 5, which is the Theatre Royal.
Yeah.
Theatre Royal never replied. The Tyne Theatre and Opera House, which at the time was run by SMG, they're the group that own most of the arenas in the UK. They got back in touch and they gave me a higher price. And the City Hall came back and said, "I can give you a higher price, but if I'm honest, I would recommend you go to the Tyne Theatre. It's a lot cheaper and only 100 seats smaller, and it's probably going to be better for the show." So I hired the Tyne Theatre, which was expensive. It's a big chunk of cash. But the way it works is you pay a deposit now, which was only about 500 quid, and then you do the show, and then anything that if it makes a profit, then they'll just pay out. They keep all the ticket money, obviously. So after the show, they'll just pay out whatever the profit was. If it doesn't make a profit, then if it doesn't look like it's going to make a profit about a week before, then you would have to pay the shortfall. So I thought, well, I'll give it a bash. The worst case scenario is I'm going to lose a 500 quid deposit, and I'm going to lose whatever I spend on advertising the show. So I hired the venue, went ahead with it. We sold reasonably well. It holds 1,100 people. I think we sold about 750 tickets in the end, which I'm happy enough with. That fills the stalls, the circle, and most of the dress circle. So I was happy, most of the upper circle rather. So I was happy with that, and did the show. Now, during the day, we were sat in, and I hired a local company to come in and put, because most theatres now are pretty much bare boxes. They don't have a lot of stuff in them in terms of lights and sound and stuff. They'll mostly have a basic PA system. The Tyne Theatre really doesn't have much. It's got some very basic lighting. But because I was just doing this as a one-off to film, I wanted it to look impeccable. So we hired a company to come in, and they put a massive, like, 20-foot screen up, a star cloth, moving lights galore. We accidentally got a sound system that was just far too big for what we needed. It was like a rock concert type sound system from a guy who likes sound systems. He came in and set up his sound system, which was enormous and far too big. We had to take half of it away because it was too big. And so that was like fine. So we did the show, and I was sat there during the day. And I was sat there with our other mutual friend, Kennedy, who'd helped me put the whole thing together. And we sat around, and I was like, I wish I could do this every day. He said, "What do you mean?" I said, "I wish I could just like turn up in a different city and sort of like just do shows all the time, and that'd be great. Like I like exploring new places, and I knew from being in Kos, I liked back-to-back shows. I much prefer doing a show every night than I would do it, every Friday and Saturday night of every week or whatever. And so that was that. So I did the show, filmed it. It went well. The footage came out good and the trailer was good. And then that was that. So I started distributing it to the sort of 2 or 3 major cruise ship agents, and I never really got a reply particularly. So I sort of popped that dream, the cruise ship bit, to one side. Bear in mind, that was the only reason I'd done this theatre. And then I thought, well, sorry, I had a nice time. I'm going to do it again. And I did lose money on the show, lost a couple of grand. But I thought, I'm going to do it again. I think I've learned where I can cut costs and make the same and make money this time.
Yeah.
So I did it again, managed to cut costs. Lost money, but I lost money in a different place. I spent the money actually elsewhere. So this time I thought, let's see what it looks like to pay to like put 1,000 posters around the city, which nearly cost me £80,000 in fines. But well, that's a different story. Let's put 1,000 posters around the city, and we'll see what happens. And so that cost about £1,000 to have all the posters distributed, and I lost that £1,000 there. So like I still lost money. I lost it in a different place.
Yeah.
I can't honestly say that putting those posters up really put extra bums on seats. So we did the show and that went fine and I had a nice time. So a couple of years later, I'd stopped doing theatres altogether. I was just cracking on with my life as a hypnotist and whatnot. And I got a message out of the blue from a woman who I knew at the time because she was something like assistant manager or something at the theatre, saying, would you fancy coming back to the Tyne Theatre? And I said, to be honest, I love the place and the team are amazing. I've got such a good relationship with them, but I lost a couple of grand the first time. I lost about £1,000 the second time. As much as I think I would love to have a Northeast presence and keep doing the theatre show, I just don't think I can justify paying for it. Anyway, so I said, so the only way I would do it is if you came back on a sort of box office ticket split, knowing that they wouldn't. And Joanne, by this point, had become manager of the theatre and still is. And what happened was SMG had let the venue go, and it was now operating and still is as a, I don't really understand it, but like as a preservation trust. It's almost like a charity and a museum, and like it functions as a theatre. But it means that their goals are different. Has to make money, but their goals are different. And so she said, we can do a split. That's fine. So I said, oh, in that case, I'll do it. And I went along, did the show, and we made a profit. So I realized that actually, just financially, somehow it works out when you try and hire a theatre, unless you know you can sell it out, the hire costs are just massively expensive. When you do a split, it's much, much easier to make a profit. So I thought that was good. So I did that about 3 times. And then eventually in the end of 2017, the middle of 2017, I thought, I want to do this little tour thing. I'm going to do 10. Let's just try 10. If I can get 10 venues like the Tyne Theatre, but smaller, to offer me a split, then I'll try that. So I started sending out emails to just finding the contacts for various theatres and emailing them saying, can I do a show? And more of them said yes than I expected. And so eventually that led to 17 in the first year. I just extended the time I'd blocked in my diary that I wanted to try and fill.
So you literally just had the balls to contact them. Obviously not just a bloody email. You had the fortunate thing of a credible, high production value, quality, top-notch, professional promo showreel to be able to include in that, which was in a venue that looks the dog's bollocks, that answered all the questions it could have possibly asked. So you're completely credible, but you just effectively contacted them and said, you're going to let me do a show on a box office split? Yeah.
And that was that. And almost all of them came back and said yes. There were a couple that came back and said no, it would have to be a hire. But I thought, well, sorry, the hire was either cheap enough or the deposit was cheap enough that I thought, sorry, I'll have a go. Oddly enough, the ones that made me that whole project lost money, but it was the ones I'd hired that made me lose the money. Had I not done them, I think it would have probably broken even or maybe made a profit. But I'd always started it knowing it was a 3 to 5 year plan. I'd always gone into it knowing if it doesn't make money for the first few years, I don't really mind. I'll deal with that, because it's only the people who stick their neck on the line and try stuff that really get bigger results. So if I'm the only hypnotist who wants to give that a bash, I mean, of course, there are other hypnotists working theatres. Andrew Newton's working a few theatres that he's done forever here in the UK, and we'll keep going back to. And, I'm not going to try and stand on his toes. I'm not going to try and get into those theatres. There's no point in that. Likewise, I know other hypnotists who are not going to try and step on my toes by going into the venues that I've built relationships with. I'm sure some will, but most won't. So I'm just gonna keep doing that and be the guy who's doing it extensively and trying to build that. So,
to be honest, though, if another hypnotist did go to one of the venues you've done, as long as they were doing it at a different time of the year, you get like maybe a comedian in every month at a venue. One
yeah,
comic
100%.
doesn't necessarily mean another comic isn't going to sell.
100%. And I'm not very protective about it, especially as we're constantly pushing the boundaries of what it can do and making the production of the show bigger and better.
I think there is too much territorial protection and arsiness in, certainly, well, probably worldwide, but certainly it's highly visible in British stage hypnosis when you see.
It's horrendous. Yeah, I don't think it's about it. It doesn't look like it's about in the States when I watch discussions on Facebook in the US, but certainly in the UK it's horrendous. I don't really have an issue with it. So that's the plan really. And then the following year we did a slightly smaller tour just because I didn't have as much time for other commitments. And eventually that I just decided, right, so that I'm going to keep now. Oddly enough, the thing that started all of this was the fact that I wanted to do cruise ships and I wanted to get signed to by one of the cruise agents and do that. And I've got lots of friends who do that, as do you. And so I've heard lots of stories. And I wanted to A, put it on my CV, and B, I just genuinely wanted to do it. But I'd never got heard back from the cruise agents. And then so I ended up doing this theatre tour. So I did 2 theatre tours, and in between, I did the Edinburgh Fringe. And oddly enough, after one of the Fringe shows, about halfway through the run, a lady came up to me and said, do you ever work cruise ships? And I said, no, I don't. And she said, oh, I work for Royal Caribbean, and handed me a business card and said, we'd love to have you on ships. So I said, oh, great. And I just didn't really look at it. I said, thank you very much. I put it in my back pocket, and off she went. And I finished taking the bucket and cleared off, and off I went. And I went back up to there's like a venue that the Edinburgh Fringe use for fringe artists to just go in. It's got free Wi-Fi and stuff. So I went in and sat down on the computer, and I got the business card out because she told me to drop her an email, and she's a headline talent booker for Royal Caribbean, and they now are trying to book entertainment directly as well as through agents. So they send scouts to the Edinburgh Fringe every year and have done. I think this is their 3rd year. And that was that. So I'm now signed with Royal Caribbean. My first cruises are booked in for this year. So I didn't get it through the route that I wanted to get it through. But equally, I don't have to pay an agent's commission either now because I'm just working directly to Royal Caribbean, but my fees are the same. So I've got what I wanted anyway. I got it through a bit of a roundabout route.
Excellent. Strange how things happen, but yeah, it's about focusing and setting goals. Bloody hell, time's running away with us. We've only got about 15 minutes, so I'm going to move off stage hypnosis. Other than to ask one question that I've asked all the stage hypnotists, and that is, how often do things go wrong? You know, people out there give this impression, oh, it never goes wrong if you do things right. You'll always get enough volunteers. You'll always get people under. Bullshit. And I've got to say, I'm amazed how honest the American stage hypnotists are about the fact that things don't always go to plan. But in Britain and Europe, tends to be people won't admit the fact that it doesn't always go to plan. What's your view on all that?
So I mean, I've been doing this since I was 16, and I'm 32 now, so that's 16 years. And I'm lucky enough, this is not me bragging, I'm lucky enough to have done a couple of thousand shows now, 1,000 of them in Greece, and the other 1,000 across other places. And in all of that time, I can honestly say that the first theatre tour that I did, so in 2017, we had some really rough nights. There were 2 shows had to be pulled because people came out of hypnosis during the interval. There was one of them where we didn't really get any volunteers in the first place because the shows just hadn't sold very well. We had probably less than 80 people in, and we just didn't get, just out of those 80 people wanted to watch, not be hypnotized. So we had 2 what I can call absolutely catastrophic nights where we just had to pull the show. One of them, I know for a fact, that theatre will never have a hypnotist on again because, it left that much of a bad taste in their mouth. But that was that. So, yeah, I mean, stuff goes wrong all the time. Like people don't react the way you expect them to react. People come out of hypnosis at unusual, unexpected moments. Occasionally, I'll still have a show where very rarely. Occasionally, I'll still have a show where nobody gets hypnotized. And I think anyone who says that doesn't happen to them either isn't doing any shows or they're just lying. Because sometimes you do just end up in the wrong situation with the wrong group of people, and it's super, super rare. It gave me a bit of a fear of doing shows for small audiences, but then, on Saturday night, I was down in Cornwall doing a Christmas party, believe it or not, in January, a Christmas party for a hair salon, 30 36, 37 people in the room, had 8 volunteers on stage, had a great show. So I've overcome that fear again now. But yeah, for a while it left me with a bit of a fear of doing small audience gigs, but I've lost that now. Yeah, so I mean, stuff does go wrong. Hypnosis is not a perfect science. It's not like, magic tricks go wrong. If magicians are doing a trick, sometimes the trick goes wrong. The fortunate thing is you can then do another trick, or you can redirect that trick somewhere else. And sometimes people won't even know it went wrong. Most of the time, people won't even know it went wrong. You don't have that luxury with hypnosis. And I've always avoided putting together a show that is. I've always avoided putting together a backup plan. I've always avoided putting together a show that looks like hypnosis and you can sort of fudge it and get through it uncomfortably, and at the end but the audience sort of leave mildly impressed. I've always avoided that. So yeah, stuff does go wrong, and anyone who says it doesn't is lying. Now, fortunately, last year on tour didn't have any of those shows, and I think we're now at a point where that is unlikely to happen again. But because I've learnt my lessons. But however experienced and good you are, you'll always have duff nights.
Excellent. I appreciate the honesty, as I'm sure the viewers will. I mean, I can tell you, I'm not going to mention names, not because they'd sue me, because they couldn't, because it's true what I'm about to say, just because I don't give these certain people publicity. They don't deserve it. But I have witnessed famous name British stage hypnotists walk out in front of, crikey, good couple of thousand people, get volunteers, and not many volunteers, mind, but get volunteers and just end up having to abandon the show because it didn't get many under. The ones that did just came out of it, and they threw a strop and stormed off stage. I
mean, it's mine has led to me being slagged off by a hypnotist that we both know on the internet quite publicly, who also does public shows. Saying that, I'm clearly showing my inexperience and I'm not ready to do theatre shows and all of that stuff yet. But equally, if you Google him, there's shows that were cancelled without any particular reason. There's no reason given. It's just this local show in this local city has been cancelled. It's in the it's in the local newspaper or whatever. Not as a news story, just a public announcement that if you were going, don't. And yeah, so it happens to the best of us.
It happens to everyone. It happens to bloody famous name comedians that are on TV. It happened at a local venue near to here recently. It just didn't sell as well as they'd expect, which is mental because the rest of the tour was sold out. God knows, clearly not popular in Middleton near Manchester, but it's in the rest of the country. It doesn't make sense sometimes. But I've got 2 questions left because we're running out of time. The one at the end is hypno related. This kind of is, but it isn't. And that is that you were also known for a brief period of time under the name Mark Milburn when you launched your internet marketing, coaching and training business, but then you decided to drop that because people started to twig, hang on, he looks a lot like Robert Temple, Hypnotist, and it just became easier. And during that time period, we worked together on some things, and I can categorically tell people up front before I ask this question that thanks to being shown things that I didn't know, and that's what it's about. It's not that Rob claims he knows any super duper secret knowledge. It's just that if he knows something you don't that works, then by being able to show you how to use that, it takes you from not knowing it and not using it to being able to understand it and use it. And I can honestly say that can have dramatically profitable results for your business. Whether you're a hypnotherapist selling self-help products, a stage hypnotist who maybe started doing courses, who knows, or you're in some other area of therapist, complementary alternative medicine, because you probably are if you're watching this, there's always a way to monetize, produce, create unique products and monetize them. And I can tell you that using techniques that Rob teaches, and he'll tell you more about it in a minute, that, on one particular thing we worked on together, we pulled in over $250,000 in a 7-day period, to the point where it looked like PayPal thought money laundering was going on and froze it. And for a moment, it seemed like we'd lost the money for at least 6 months to a year. But fortunately, we did manage to get it. And it is fortunate because we had to pay affiliates as well. But I'm not going to say any more than that. I'll let Rob explain what it is he does, what he used to do as Mark Milburn, but now does as Robert Temple, and how he could perhaps help you, and why it might be a benefit to you to get in touch with Rob and discuss your ideas, your products and stuff. So go on, Rob.
You'll be pleased to know I've since had 5 PayPal accounts closed down, and they're closing online marketers down left, right, and centre. There's a Facebook group about it, and they're getting worse now. They're starting to keep the money and all sorts. Anyway, So basically, when I was in cost, I was making decent money enough, but I was spending all of it, like just on drink and having fun. And so I started to drink at that point. Started drinking, having fun, eating out every night, whereas most people would live off pot noodles. And so I was, but as an entertainer, you were just paid better than you were as a barman or something. So I was just spending it. So making decent money. And while I was sat there during the day, I've always liked being on the computer. I'm a bit of a nerd. I like being on the computer, and I like stuff like building websites. Like I was learning to build websites at school, and I'm not very good at it, but I was learning all of that stuff. And so in about 2008, I stumbled across this idea of selling stuff on the internet. So you can create a course, as you know all too well, and sell it on the internet, and then people pay you for it, and then they get access to the course. Whether that is, the good old-fashioned DVDs and VHS tapes sent through the post. And, it's a bit like there'll be people who are in their 60s and 70s watching this who'll remember buying, like through an advert in the paper, sending off a stamped envelope and getting an order form, and then filling out the order form and sending it off with a check and getting like a box of cassette tapes through the post. It's just the modern equivalent of that. The problem is the minute you say make money on the internet, everyone thinks, oh, it's a scam, it's MLM, it's a pyramid scheme. But it's not. It's just what used to happen in the papers. If you wanted to buy a study-at-home course on how to learn Spanish, it's that, but it's on the internet. And so I stumbled across this idea of being able to sell stuff on the internet. And because I had a natural inclination to enjoy being sat on the computer, I sort of just fell into it. And also I thought, as an entertainer, you spend lots of time sat around doing nothing. Like in the past couple of months, you and I have both flown for probably 15 hours there, 15 hours back to do a 1-hour show, 45-minute show in this venue abroad. So there's lots of traveling. And so I wanted something to do that filled in the time. I also knew that when I left Kos and came back to the UK, I didn't have a market here, and it was going to take me a while to build up clients and get gigs. So I wanted somebody I literally wanted to have a business that could pay my bills, a couple of grand a month, to live in the UK whilst I got myself back off the ground. Now, when I started this up, I started creating and selling information products like ebooks and selling them online. I did for a little while, for a couple of years, think people are going to be well confused if I'm selling myself as a stage hypnotist over there and I'm selling this stuff on the internet about making money over here and all this other stuff. People are going to get confused. So I decided I would just create a pen name. I didn't ever think I would end up going to events and speaking at events and all that other stuff about marketing. I thought I'm just going to be an anonymous person on the internet. So like so many fiction authors rather, I decided I would just create a pen name. That became Mark Milburn. Basically my recent ex-girlfriend, her name was Milburn. That's where that came from. And I liked alliteration, so I just picked a name for the beginning. That was literally that. And for a couple of years was creating and selling products under that name. Eventually I just became a bit uncomfortable with it. I realized there's a massive crossover between the world of hypnosis and the world of online marketing. There are so many people. Yeah. You look at people like Telman Knutson, loads of other people who've gone from hypnosis into selling stuff online. So I decided to scrap the pen name in the end and just did it as myself. And that's led to a whole bunch of other things. I now run a software business where we sell marketing software to help people sell more stuff, speak on stage about email marketing specifically as part of that. And coach people in that side of things. So yeah, I'm really obsessed with helping people who have a skill of some description, anything from gardening and dog training through to, again, alternative complementary therapies, to monetize the skills that they've got, not just in the therapy room, but also by selling downloadable products on the internet, which of course can lead, as you know, to selling out seminars, which can lead to all sorts of things. So that's what I do when I'm not performing. What I'm trying to do is balance my life so that in August, September and October, I'm doing the Fringe and 2 months on tour, and I have 3 months to do as many shows as it's possible to do for the public. Mm-hmm. The rest of the year, if I get a couple of gigs a month when I go out and get paid, I put my fees right up. So I only have to take the work I really want to do. Again, not bragging, just that was a decision I made. I'd rather do fewer shows for more money. So I lose a lot of gigs because they can't afford to pay that fee. That's okay. They can hire somebody else. So I go and do Christmas parties in December and January, weddings and stuff spread throughout the year, corporate events spread throughout the year, fly abroad a couple of times to India and other places to do shows a couple of times a year. So I do a bunch of gigs sporadically. I'm now going to be doing cruises from this year as well, probably about one a month. And then that means that the rest of the time I can run my online stuff. And it's the perfect sort of balance of everything I want to do.
Excellent. So before I ask you the final question, which is the one that I ask everybody on Hypnosis Week, could you tell everybody, I mean, there will be a link below this video when it goes live, but can you tell everyone how they can get in contact with you if they'd like to talk to you more about how you could perhaps help them get their ideas into tangible, sellable products, and then how to actually monetize them and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, to be honest, I'm going to be going on a bit of a social media and stuff hiatus and disappearing a bit, just because I don't see as much value in being on Facebook as I used to do. So I'm going to keep my Facebook page and all of that stuff, but as a profile, I'm gonna go under the radar a little bit at some point this year. Don't know when. Might be next month. Might be the month. Might be in 12 months' time. I don't know. The best place to get me, the only place I'm going to be actively monitoring myself, is my Instagram. So if you just go to Instagram and my username is Robert Temple Hypnotist, feel free to drop me a message on there. At the minute I reply to everything on there that comes in myself. So drop me a message on there and we can have a chat. And if you've just enjoyed the interview, let me know. If you've hated the interview, let me know. That's okay as well.
If people want to come and see you do a show, where's the website where they can see tour dates and stuff?
It's roberttemplehypnotist.com, and there's a tour dates page on the navigation bar at the top, and you'll see all the dates on there. There's only a couple of them for this year on sale right now. The rest of them are going on sale over the next 2 weeks. And alternatively, just come to the Edinburgh Fringe, and hopefully, assuming I get a place, you'll see me there.
And if people are watching, they've already got a product, they already do email marketing, they're already reasonably internet savvy, but they'd like to investigate using surveys and effective email marketing and stuff, what website should they be looking at?
There's two. So there's emailmarketingheroes.com, which is a brand I run with our mate Kennedy, and responsesuite.com is the name of our software. But if you want to get in touch with us and like watch what we're doing on a bit of a bigger scale, emailmarketingheroes.com is probably the best place to go.
Excellent. So that leads me into, because we've gone just over the hour, to the last question. And it sounds so simple, and yeah, it's so many different ways this has gone with different guests. In the context of stage hypnosis, if somebody was to knock on your door now, imagine they knock on the door, knock, 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 and just so I get a plug, they've got a copy of Stage Hypnosis Made Easy by Jonathan Royal, available on Amazon. Well, that's all they've got in their hand.
Yeah.
And all they've done is they've read that, and they've seen you do a show, some other hypnotists do a show, so they bought this book, they had a read of it and think, I reckon I could do that. But it seems a bit too easy. All right, saying that things can go wrong, but it still seems a bit easy. And then from the other point of view, it seems like monumentally difficult to be able to get your first show. So it seems too easy how it's done, but difficult how to get. Although people have watched this interview, I'm sure they'll have got the message. It's a case of doing stuff, being persistent, focused, and whatnot. What would your top 3 tips be to somebody who was thinking about becoming a stage hypnotist?
So, yeah, and it is. There is a dangerously high barrier to entry to be a hypnotist now, because it appears to be very, especially in the UK where we've got the legal bit to juggle with. I probably get messages every month from people who are just asking, magicians who want to try stage hypnosis or whatever, who are just dabbling, and they sort of say, what is this law? What can I and can't I do? And does it still apply, and all the rest of it? So number one, get a really good basic understanding of what the law says you can and can't do. And you can speak to me, you can speak to Alex/Jonathan, you can speak to any of us who are working pros, who are nice people, and just say, right, I'd like to do a show. What's the law look like in plain English? And what are the 3 or 4 things I need to know? So first of all, just ask somebody who knows the law, if you're in the UK anyway, and get an understanding of what that is and what you can and can't do. Secondly, know that the only way you'll ever be able to do this is to put it in front of an audience. I don't buy into for the most part, the idea of practicing on your friends and family and people you've met on the street, or going to hypnosis meetups. There's no point in going to a lot of hypnosis meetups that I hear about, because you're just going to sit and hypnotize other people who want to be hypnotized, and they're going to be hypnotized because they want you to be hypnotized when they try and hypnotize you. So I don't buy into a lot of this hypnosis meetup stuff, which is going to be controversial for some people watching this. So for me, the only way you'll ever be able to do this, it's not like magic or singing or anything else. It's probably the only entertainment form where the only way you can practice it is just to get out and do it in front of an actual audience who expect it to work. So Don't try and do that. Instead, just try and get a show. If that means doing it for free, do it for free. Just get out and try. Do a charity night even, where you hire a local club or a pub or something and get them to flog the tickets, and all the money goes to charity. The pub gets the bar takings as well as the positive reputation of doing a charity event. And then just go and do it. That's the same as doing a show for free, except you're helping a cause. So I definitely recommend doing that. And third tip would probably be that you have to be prepared that it's going to be 90% being a decent performer and 10% being any use with hypnosis. Like for me, if you are 10%, I am by far not the best hypnotist on earth. If you like rank us all together, I am by far not the best or most knowledgeable hypnotist. But I think I'm a good performer, and that's what helps me to do what I do. I think I'm a good hypnotist. I don't think I'm the best in the world by any means or anywhere close. So I think understand that actually the thing you really need to master once you understand the basics. If you read a book like that and you go, well, that's got to be more simple than it is. That's because the rest of it, the major lion's share of it, beyond learning hypnosis, once you've got that bit down, is just learning to be a good, charismatic, funny performer. Can you be funny without people doing daft things? If you can, that's a great skill. And I didn't have that. I just had to learn it over a period of time. And can you present stuff well without having to have people hypnotized? If you can, that's a skill that you need. So just understand that actually to become a really great stage hypnotist is about being a really great performer. In magic, there's the old adage that a magician is merely an actor playing the part of a magician. I think it's true, but I think it's much more true about stage hypnosis.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Thank you very much indeed for your time, Rob. It's been a pleasure. Wish you luck with the tour and everything. I will be coming to see you again.
Good.
And everyone watching, as I always say week after week, and I don't care, I'm going to repeat myself. Now you've watched it, if stage hypnosis is your chosen field, go and get a pad and a pen, watch this again and take notes, because there's more quality information and advice in the past hour than at first sight you'll have actually realised. Because Rob's been amazingly honest about the fact that things aren't always plain sailing in show business. You know, you do have to put graft in and have a focused plan and make things work. So thank you ever so much, Rob.
Thanks for having me.
Join us next week for another edition of Hypnosis Week.